There are a lot of good amp DACs for under $200. The Topping NX4, hifi hip DAC, ecozerta, monolith USB DAC, Heidi's S2, and many other products are fairly economical options for new audiophiles. But what about those who have a limited budget and want more power than dongle DACs like the ecozerta and the S2 can provide? Is there a product for them? It turns out there might be. Fosi Audio released the HD3 recently. This is a palm-sized amp DAC with very respectable specifications and power output. It has a balanced output, it's made of aluminum, and it costs about $70. Is the HD3 a meaningful option for budget-conscious audiophiles or a throwaway product? Fosi says that the HD3 has the Sabre ES9018K2M DAC. There's only one in the HD3, but the DAC is capable of resolving up to 24-bit at 192 kHz PCM and DSD-128. This DAC is several years old, but was in products like the Topping DX7. The HD3 has USB-C input for data and micro USB for charging. It has 3 buttons on the side, 1 for power and 2 for volume adjustment. These buttons are aluminum. They seem just a tiny bit loose, but do not seem like they would pop out or break. The top of the HD3 has a 3.5mm and a 2.5mm jack. Fosi says that the HD3 supports up to 500 ohm headphones. From the single-ended output, the HD3 provides 100 mW into 16 ohms and up to 30 mW into 120 ohms. Out of the balanced output, the HD3 provides 200 mW into 16 ohms and 25 mW into 500 ohms. Clearly, at least on paper, the HD3 provides significant benefit out of the balanced connection. Fosi says that you cannot use both the 3.5 and the 2.5mm at the same time. I emailed Fosi and asked if there is an internal switch that disables one output if the other is being used, or if they are simply telling us not to plug 2 headphones in at once. I haven't received a response, so just be smart and do not plug 2 headphones into the jack at the same time. The HD3 comes in a small package that contains just it and 2 cables. One is a USB-C to USB-C cable. This is nicely braided and does feel premium. The second cable is a micro USB to USB-A charging cable, and it's serviceable. There is no carrying pouch or protective case. As for build, the HD3 is indeed built of aluminum and there is some wood accent. As far as I can tell, it is actual wood, not wood veneer. You can rub your fingers on the wood and you can feel the grains. The HD3 is pocketable and does not have any sharp edges. It is as thick as my iPhone 12 Max. It is fairly light. Overall, the features in the build are quite good considering the price. There are other sub-$100 products that offer similar audio resolution, but the HD3 does have that extra kick of power. There's nothing to gripe about regarding construction or accessories. You get exactly what you need to plug and play, no frills included. I appreciate the USB-C cable, which does feel rather nice. The HD3's packaging and build make a good first impression. To determine the sound signature of the HD3, I use the Allo S4X. This is one of the few headphones I have heard that are neutral. If you're interested about the S4X, watch my review about it. The S4X is 32 ohms and fairly easy to drive. I plugged them into the single-ended output. I connected the HD3 to my Windows 10 PC and MacBook Pro M1. I kept system volume on the computer to max and control volume on the HD3. I played music through Amazon Music HD. The HD3 does not have a screen to indicate volume. There's an LED at the bottom shoulder which flashes red when you've reached the lowest volume. I started from there and counted the number of volume up button presses until I heard the music on the S4X. After 2 volume button presses, I could just barely hear audio in the S4X. After 15 presses, the S4X is at low, comfortable volume. At 20 presses, the S4X is at very comfortable volume. At 30 presses, the S4X is far too loud for safe listening. And this, by the way, all over 3.5mm single-ended. From what I could tell, the HD3 maxes out at 42 clicks. At the 43rd click, the LED flashes blue indicating maximum volume had already been achieved. Hopefully this gives you a vague idea about the single-ended power available. We will of course talk about power output later. The S4X is a neutral headphone, with the slight caveat that it does marginally accentuate female sibilants and has a very slight push in treble. It appears that the HD3 has a neutral and clear sound signature. The S4X has a neutral rendition of bass, where sub-bass is fully represented and mid-bass is not overemphasized. While listening to Mountains by Hans Zimmer, I noticed that the S4X did render the sub-bass rumble from the very beginning of the song, and did not hear any accentuation or de-emphasis, or in other words, the S4X sounded as neutral in this regard as it does on the RME ADI2 DAC or other neutral sources that I have. In the middle of the song, there is a crescendo, and the S4X recreated the organ powerfully. That instrument cut through the mix, but did not appear to be distorted or harsh. I listened to Conquer by Overwork and Irodori by Kodo, tracks that have a heavy emphasis on drums. The HD3 and S4X pairing perfectly recreated all the drums in both songs. There was a natural amount of melding among instruments, but no muddiness or distortion. Drum impacts were hard, but not aggressive. That is, I could hear the thwacking of the drumstick on the drum head, but that sound was not piercing or harsh. When multiple drums of various sizes played, I could hear the different tonalities of each. I listened to several hip-hop songs like Pure Water, Nupatek, Uproar, and Reel It In. On all tracks, the HD3 and S4X accurately recreated the sub-bass. I could hear the thumping and subwoofer effect, and the vocals remained clear. The sub-bass sounded like the subwoofer was several feet away from me. The HD3 seems to resolve the mids in a neutral fashion. As I said before, the S4X has a slight emphasis in female sibilants. When I played Orla Gartland's song Why Am I Like This, the S4X presented that sibilance marginally pushed forward. The drums and guitars were clear, though they did meld slightly. Vocals remained 2 steps ahead of the instruments. In Want You Back by Haim, the S4X again slightly accentuated the primary vocalist sibilants. This was the same performance as with other neutral sources I have used with the S4X. The timbre of the guitar, drums, piano, and bass all sounded natural and full. There was minor melding among these instruments, but no muddiness. Whether I listened to pop, rock, or folk music, the S4X and HD3 pairing seemed to provide a neutral signature for mid-centric instruments. Vocals always sounded full, yet not shouty or harsh. Treble seems to be neutral on the HD3. I listened to Scherzo for X-Wings, Flight from the City, Take 5, and various classical pieces. Brass and horns always retain their energy, but with a slight bit of a boost. This boost is how the S4X sounds on other neutral sources as well. Pianos do not distort, multiple instruments are clear but not analytical, that is, nothing sounds tinny or off-timbre or harsh. Detail on the HD3 is about average. The S4X did not seem to render any more detail from the HD3 than it did with the Monolith Liquid Spark and Shit Modi stack that I tested against. In fact, I would say that the stack and the HD3 provided about the same amount of detail and resolution. If there was any noticeable difference, I think it was probably more an issue of imperfect volume matching. Overall, the HD3 seems to be fairly neutral. Is it possible that you might hear a bit more detail or clarity from other products? Well, certainly. This is particularly the case when your headphones need a bit more power than what the HD3 can provide. But if we're looking at the HD3 in general terms, then it seems to not color the sound. If you want to listen to the music with minimal alterations, then the HD3 probably will do that job quite well. I usually recommend people try an inexpensive dedicated amplifier before they discard a headphone as junk. You'd be surprised how often you can hear a difference if you just give the drivers the power they need. That being said, planar magnetic headphones need power, or voltage, or current. Take your pick, it depends on who you ask. If you look at the Avantone and Audeze websites, you will notice that their headphones require at least 250 milliwatts for peak performance. I can say a few things about the HD3's ability to drive headphones. First, it can drive most dynamic driver headphones just fine. A lot of headphones are around the 32 ohm mark. If yours is close to that impedance, the HD3 will easily power them. Second, the HD3 is simply not capable of providing the minimum peak power for some large planar magnetic headphones. So if you think you can drive the LCD2 or Avantone planar with the HD3, I'll give you a dose of reality. Yes, those types of headphones will make sound and will get loud, but they will not display the same performance as with proper amplification. Indeed, connected to the HD3, both my LCD2 and planar sounded a bit muddier, less detailed, and had more narrow soundstage than when I plugged both headphones into the shit Magni Heresy. The third point is that the HD3 will easily power any IEM you have. Well, probably. I do not have any of Audeze's planar IEMs and I cannot vouch for their performance. But rest assured, if you have the Tin Hi-Fi T2, Moondrop Starfield, meze 11 or 12, Campfire Audio Andromeda, Light Harmonic Stella, Omera, Ibasso IT00 or IT01, or any other typical IEM, the HD3 will give you an abundance of power. I tried the HD6XX and Beyerdynamic T1 2nd Gen on the HD3. The former, the HD6XX, is 300 ohms, and the latter, the T1, is 600 ohms. I tried both the single-ended and the balanced output for these headphones. Remember, the HD3 has 42 clicks from 0 volume to max volume. On single-ended with the 6XX, I heard music at the 17th volume click. On the 29th volume click, the 6XX got to a comfortable volume. At the 40th click, the 6XX was at the very limit of safe listening volume. On balance connection using my Hard Audio cable kit, the 6XX produced audible music at around the 13th click. On the 23rd click, the 6XX got to a comfortable volume. At the 35th click, the 6XX was at the maximum safe volume. I plugged the T1 into the single-ended next. At volume click 18, I heard music. At the 30th click, the T1 achieved a moderate volume. At the 35th click, the T1 was at comfortable volume. At the maximum volume, the T1 was still within safe listening levels. Through balance connection, I heard music at the 12th click on the T1. At the 24th click, the T1 was at moderate volume. At the 30th click, the T1 was at a comfortable volume. And at the 40th step, the T1 was at the limit of safe listening levels. To be fair, the 6XX can eke out a bit more detail and clarity along with slightly harder bass impact when given greater power. But the HD3 was quite capable of driving this headphone. What was surprising is that the HD3 was able to drive the T1. Now, despite the T1's extreme high impedance, a moderately powerful amplifier is usually enough to get agreeable performance, and I think that is what the HD3 does here. With greater power output to the T1, I think the headphones provide more clarity and wider soundstage and perhaps a bit more bass emphasis. Nevertheless, I think it is impressive how well the HD3 is able to handle both of these high impedance headphones. People sometimes talk about getting a powerful amplifier for headroom. That is, some people recommend you get the most powerful amplifier you can just in case you get a headphone that is harder to drive. This is wise advice and one which you should consider. But it is not necessarily the correct advice. You see, I really do not want people to spend more money on a feature they are not going to use. If you do not need more power and you have no reason to think that you will get a higher impedance headphone in the future, then just save your money. If you are a new audiophile and you do not know if you really want to delve into this costly hobby, then I think it is essential to spend as little as possible until you figure out what you actually do want. The HD3 does not have the power of the Tomping NX4, the hifi hip DAC, or the Monolith THX Portable, but the HD3 is also a lot cheaper. In my view, if you need a reasonably powerful yet affordable amp DAC, then the HD3 does the job quite well. Clearly, there are more powerful, better-built portable amp DACs in the market. When people ask for portable amp recommendations, I do have a few go-to options. The Tomping NX4, hifi hip DAC, and Monolith THX Portable are excellent options with different sound signatures and features. All three provide good performance and, I think, good value. But there are times when people do not want to spend hundreds of dollars on a single component, and there are other times when people simply should not spend a lot of money. For example, those who need a cheap product that they can lug around and abuse may not want to pay $150 for the NX4 or the hip DAC. and those who are new to the audiophile game may be hesitant to spend a few $100s when they don't really know if they want to jump into the hobby any further. This is why I try to caution people against riding on the hype train. Yes, there are some great products in the field, but you should not feel like you must buy them. The danger some new audiophiles face is this. They may think if they get the most expensive piece of kit they can afford, they will be happy. But that is not necessarily the case. I would rather that people save money for headphones and IEMs than waste it on more and more expensive amps and DACs. All you really need is a reliable amplifier and a DAC whose sound signature you like. This brings us to value. Yes, the HD3 is value. I think for $70 you do get plenty. Power from the single-ended section is not necessarily impressive, but the balanced output should be more than enough for most people using dynamic driver headphones. The HD3 renders high-resolution audio. It is plug-and-play. It is fairly well built. It comes with all the cables you need. It is small enough to pocket, and it is dead simple to use. The sound signature appears to be neutral. This, I think, is a safe place to start. You can experiment with hifi and chord later if you decide to stay in the audiophile world. And if you are a seasoned audiophile, then I have to say that the HD3 is no slouch. Do yourself a favor and do not compare it to the Oppo Ha2 or the NX4. Those products aren't exactly in the same bracket as the HD3. But as an experienced audiophile, if you want a more affordable amp DAC, then the HD3 is a fine option to consider. In short, the HD3 is a product that is well placed for new and seasoned audiophiles. No, it does not have the bells and whistles, but you're not paying for those extra features. You're paying $70 for a sturdy chassis, neutral sound, and respectable power. To that end, I think the Fosi HD3 is a worthwhile investment and should be considered among all the other options you may have. It does not excel in any category, but it does enough to justify its price tag.